This is History Myths and Myth-Conceptions. And today's myth is the Exodus. The Exodus of Israelites, or ancient Hebrews, from Egypt is a very important event for all the Abrahamic religions. It is also a very important event for the modern Jewish people and the nation-state of Israel. Or maybe even pretty much for everybody, as some people think. What if the Exodus had never happened is one of the essays in the collection titled What Ifs of Jewish History, published by Cambridge University Press. And this is how the author, Stephen Weitzman, puts it. The consequences of an Exodus that never happens are profound, affecting not just the Jews, but all of humanity. And then he refers to the world of Robert Silverberg's alternative history novel, Roma Eterna, where the Exodus is the point of divergence. No Exodus, no Israelites in Canaan, Jesus was never born, no Christianity, and so on. It is a very interesting work of fiction. The problem here is that what if the Exodus had never happened shouldn't describe any consequences. It should describe the current reality, because the Exodus never happened. It is a religious myth straight from the Bible. There are no historical sources on this event, and it can't be dated. Even the archeological evidence is zero, and archaeology tends to be very politically driven. Obviously, religious people think that everything you can read about in the scriptures is either a historical fact or something inspired by the actual events. No, it is fiction. Everything in the Old Testament is pure fiction. It is just a set of stories that happened to the characters who never existed. It is not a historical text. Of course, the story of the Exodus is also told by people like Flavius Josephus, but he was describing mythological events. Actually, a half of his Antiquities of the Jews is just a more or less straightforward retelling of the Old Testament and has almost no historical value. The other half is debatable, since Josephus is a very suspicious author. There are even theories, or fringe theories if you will, that he wasn't in fact a first-century historian, but also a made-up character invented by the Christian Church, who was creating the origin story of Christianity, and needed something more than just scriptures. And they just created the main and practically the only source on much of the history of ancient Hebrews, as a byproduct of their religious propaganda. For political reasons, the story of the Exodus is obviously quite important for the modern Jewish people, even if they are not religious at all. But the perception of this story evolved over time. Let me quote the article from Le Monde Diplomatique written by Shlomo Zand, an Israeli historian and professor emeritus of Tel Aviv University. Is the Bible a historical text? Writing during the early half of the 19th century, the first modern Jewish historians, such as Isaac Marcus Jost and Leopold Zunz, didn't think so. They regarded the Old Testament as a theological work reflecting the beliefs of Jewish religious communities after the destruction of the First Temple. It wasn't until the second half of the century that Heinrich Graetz and others developed a national vision of the Bible and transformed Abraham's journey to Canaan, the flight from Egypt, and the United Kingdom of David and Solomon into an authentic national past. By constant repetition, Zionist historians have subsequently turned these biblical truths into the basis of national education. What is interesting, some of the myths that were useful for nation building at first were rejected, but then gradually started to appear in the history books in Israel. For example, one of the important myths is the story that ancient Hebrews were exiled from Palestine by the Romans, possibly even twice, in the year 70 AD, and then once again in 132 AD. It never happened. It is also a myth, and historians understand it quite clearly. Even in the middle of the 20th century, historians in Israel understood it too. So this myth wasn't emphasized that much in the books and in the education of children. But not today. It is used for political reasons, even if these tales of the exile are not based on historical evidence. And there are plenty of people in Israel who actually consider this reliance on fiction and religious myths a serious hindrance to formation of a normal, modern, and secular Israeli nation.